for coming out to the Flurry workshop at the Tech Lounge at South by Southwest. I really appreciate it. Please help yourself to some pizza and beer. We've got plenty, so help yourself. My name is Jarah Euston. I'm the Director of Analytics at Flurry. And if you're not familiar with Flurry, Flurry is the leader in mobile app analytics. We are tracking about 300,000 mobile applications now across about 100,000 different companies. So our clients range from everyone, one-man show, developing their first app, to Fortune 500 companies that have applications that have daily active users in the tens of millions. So it's a wide variety of folks that are using Flurry, and we're really leaders in this space, and we started out in mobile app analytics back in 2008. So we've seen the whole rise of the mobile app economy. And what I want to share with you today is I want to spend a little bit of time just sharing some macro level overview of our mobile outlook for 2013. Because we're tracking so many different apps, we see a lot of the mobile ecosystem that other folks don't see, so I want to share that with you guys. And then I want to dive a little bit deeper into what analytics means for your application and how you can use analytics to make the most out of it and increase your ROI. Because we're all trying to do something with our app, and analytics can really be a partner in helping you figure out what's working and what doesn't, and helping you get to where you want to go. So in addition to tracking applications with analytics, we also have advertising solutions. So we take all of the data that we track with analytics and we use that to help power advertising. For you as a publisher, if you want to monetize your app with advertising, we can help you do that. And as an advertiser, if you seek to promote your application, you want to drive installs, targeted advertising is a great way to do it. So first let's talk about what we see for this year in mobile, because it's been kind of a wild ride. So here's where we are in terms of mobile growth and the number of devices that are active. And you can see that sometime this year we're going to hit 1.3 billion. And that's, I think, a conservative estimate, because we're probably hovering around about 1 billion today. And if you think about it, what's the total addressable market for mobile? There are about 5 billion potential worldwide mobile device owners, right? Because these have to be middle-class folks who can at least afford a phone or a tablet. And a conservative estimate would be about 2 billion. There's a lot of upside here, right? Because prices are dropping, especially when you look at Android. So now you don't have to spend $600 to buy an iPad, you can buy a $200 Kindle, and that opens up the market for a ton of people. And to put this in context, there are 2.3 billion internet subscribers worldwide. And so do you believe that everyone who subscribes to the internet is going to have a smart device? I think it's an easy answer. What happened at the beginning of this year, which is really interesting, is that China exceeded the US in terms of the largest market for mobile phones, for smartphones and tablets. And you can see the growth trajectory. The US is kind of it's still growing, but it's starting to level out, whereas China is just kind of a hockey stick growth. And we expect that to continue. Because right now in the US, there's still going to be growth and there's always going to be replacements, but in China, you still have a bunch of new smart device users that are just starting to come online. And we see this kind of breakneck growth in the developing world. We're still growing in the US, but it's coming from a larger base. But if you look at Colombia, Turkey, Egypt, these countries that you may not think about are growing, and this is in billions here. So if you look at Thailand, that's 1.7 billion. So disruption across multiple industries. What we look at here is, and unfortunately because I'm projecting off of an iPad, the slide doesn't really turn out, but this is in terms of percent growth. So we're looking at 387% growth in the social category in terms of app sessions. And when I say a session, in the app world, we talk about sessions instead of something like a page visit on the web. So a session starts when you launch an application, and it ends when you close that application or the application gets timed out because it's been in the background. So that's a huge growth in the number of folks opening and engaging in social applications, in shopping utilities. And you see gaming, which is really where mobile apps started, is still growing, but it's kind of petering out compared to these other categories that are just starting to accelerate. Because just like the US, gaming's growing from a larger base. So its growth is slowing, but it's still the biggest category of apps. This is something that we put out at the end of last year, just taking a look at what kind of stats could you expect from an application in different types of categories. So looking at the different quadrant, what we're looking at is the frequency of use per week on the y-axis and the retention over 90 days on the x-axis. And by retention, we mean are users coming back to the application. So what's your retention rate for users coming back 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? And you can see there's different types of categories naturally fall into these different buckets on this plot, right? So over here around music, photo and video, deals, health and fitness, you've got low retention and relatively low frequency. So these are apps you might try out for a little while, but they're not evergreen. You try them for a little bit, they meet your needs, and then you move on. So think of a fitness app. You start out using it with all the best intentions. After 30 days, you stop coming back and your retention drops off. And while it'd be great if you had 7 days, seven time frequency in a week for a fitness app, come on, let's be real, maybe it's 1, 2, 3 times at best. Then you look at apps like communications over there in the top right quadrant, quadrant 1. And what we see with apps like that, those are evergreen. They have high retention and high frequency. So I don't know if any of you use an app to essentially text message your friends, but there are apps like Line, Pinger, Kakao in Asia, where folks are just on these applications all day long chatting with their friends, and they're not paying for text messages anymore. So I wanted to give you a sense of what can I really expect my metrics to look like based on what category my app is in. So I think it might be unreasonable for you to assume that I'm going to develop a health and fitness app, for example, that's going to have 50% 90-day retention and 8 sessions a week frequency, right? That's just not the user behavior of that particular category. So it's always helpful to put whatever you're working on in perspective with the averages for these categories. So unfortunately, this is not working with the iPad. So what this slide was going to show was that we've seen a big shift in terms of the categories that you use on a phone versus a tablet. So on a phone, these tend to be more in and out experiences. Like I'm checking the news, I'm checking the weather, I'm checking sports, I'm sending a message. I'm just quickly consuming content or creating content in little bite-sized nuggets. Whereas on a tablet, this is more of a curl up experience. I'm ready to sit on my couch, consume some content, and invest a couple hours with this device. That's not the case on the phone. And so what you see is that the number of sessions that people engage in on tablets for things like games, there are fewer sessions, but they take longer. So I might only play a game once a week on my phone, but when I sit down to play that game, I'm going to play it for an hour. So there's a big difference in the amount of time you spend on your tablet versus your phone for these different types of categories. To that point, we've seen a lot of change in how users are engaging in their devices while they're watching television. So tablets in particular, people seem to be, you can be on your tablet texting, you could be on your tablet engaging in social activity while you have the TV on. And what we looked at was the Super Bowl this year, and what was people's app activity while they were watching the Super Bowl. So this is the largest television event in the country every year, right? Almost everybody in America is gathered around the television in a social environment. Nobody watches the Super Bowl alone, right? People are watching the Super Bowl with friends, they're eating greasy food, and even with all of that, they're still picking up their phone and engaging in an application all throughout the Super Bowl. And so what this is showing you here on the y-axis is the app usage index. So how many sessions is Flurry seeing during the Super Bowl? And then this is the time of the Super Bowl. So what we saw is that during the national anthem, the number of app sessions decreased. And then look at what happened when Beyonce went on. People put down their phone and looked at Beyonce. And then the last few minutes of the game, we see a drop in app usage. And we assume that's because people are paying attention to what's on the screen. No, we're very sure that the entire country did not put down their phone and go to the toilet at the same time.
I'm wondering how you get the correlation there, that the decision there was that everybody's focusing on the screen rather than doing other activities.
Yeah, because this is literally the time when the show was on the screen. These are the minutes for when Beyonce was performing, and these are the number of application sessions that Flurry was tracking. And it has a huge drop when that starts. It remains low while Beyonce is performing, and then as soon as she's done, it goes right back up. So it's totally correlated with those precise minutes when Beyonce is on screen. And if you look at what happened last year, this is the Madonna halftime show. And you can see that Beyonce caused people to put their phones down more than Madonna. So people are more engaged in Beyonce than in Madonna. And this is really interesting because you can see what was people's reaction to the Coke Polar Bears ad, to the Battleship movie ad, to the Star Trek ad. And you can see there's these pockets where people's attention really shifted to the television. But for the most part, when people were moving the ball down the field, everyone else was on their phone. So we at Flurry think that this is really interesting, and an interesting way of showing that even when I'm engaging in something else, my phone is always there. It's something that's so personal, I'm so connected and tethered to it that I'm engaging on this device even when I'm eating wings, even when all my friends are over, even when the biggest television event of the year is on, I'm still checking my phone. And here's a little deeper dive into the different key milestones of the game. And this is halftime, and this is Madonna and this is Beyonce. And it's tough to see with how this renders on the iPad, but a drop in app starts, and Madonna only caused a 3% drop. So Beyonce beat Madonna by about 6 percentage points. So given that we're always on these devices, even when we're with our friends, even when we're watching TV, Flurry wanted to understand, how does that really impact the developer? Because not everybody's on the same device. And we recently took a look at the different types of device models and how does that impact your life as a developer, your decisions about what form factors do I really want to optimize for. And what we found was that in order to reach 80% of total active devices, so if you wanted to reach 80% of all smart device users in the world, you would have to support 156 different device models. And so I don't know what your plans are, but you're probably not imagining QAing and optimizing for 156 different devices. And we think this is really surprising and really speaks to a challenge as a developer if you want to get wide reach, because there are so many different form factors that you need to optimize for. But on the flip side, the good news is that there is some concentration in which types of devices people are using. So what this is showing you is the active device index. And we looked at how many users does a single model of a device that runs one of these OSs have. And what you'll see is that the average device model for iOS has about 15 times the user as the average device model for Android. So if you optimize for one iOS device, you're going to reach 15x the number of users as if you optimized for one particular Android device. And so what should you do if that's the case? Well, if you wanted to really just focus in on the devices where people were actually engaging in apps, because as a developer, your objective, I'm assuming, is to get people to engage in your application, we find that 72 device models are responsible for 80% of all app sessions. So if you focused on the top 70 device models and optimized for that, you would be capturing probably about 80% of all sessions that people are engaged in. So it is possible to really target your efforts. And at Flurry, I know that our engineers are on the first name basis with the clerk at Best Buy, because they're always running out to buy a new Android device to make sure that stuff works on a device that we haven't tested on yet. So it can be really overwhelming to develop a compelling experience on a lot of different devices. And so this is another way of looking at, how many active users per device model does any given, device have. And now we're looking at it from a manufacturer perspective. So if I wanted to develop for Android, my next question is, well, which form factor, which flavor of Android do I really need to care about, right? Because I could just do a generic Android app, but that's not going to be optimized for all the different form factors. And what we found is that actually the Kindle Fire has really high usage versus other Android devices. So if you're thinking like, okay, maybe I really want to optimize a rich experience for Android, let me pick one device to start with, we would say, why not consider the Kindle Fire? Because we see that owners of Kindle Fires really are engaged in their device and they use a lot of applications and generate a lot of sessions. But they still don't beat iOS users. So this is the sessions per device generated by devices that are running these different OSs. And you can still see that Android beats everybody else. And look at what's happening with Windows, minimal, BlackBerry, small, and Android. It's about 2/3 of what iOS is. And I think that's why you see such developer loyalty to iOS, that people like developing for that platform. And part of the reason is because iOS users engage in applications just more than Android users. So there's a whole things to keep in mind when you're deciding, what do I want to do?
Does that speak to the superiority of the user experience of iOS? Or what really drives the high, I guess, index of?
Yeah, so good question. So what's really driving the high index of usage on iOS? Is it the better user experience, the better UX? I think that's certainly part of it. I also think that it's easier to develop a great experience for iOS because there's essentially 3 devices you need to consider. Whereas for Android, you've got devices with different aspect ratios, with different screen sizes, with different functionality, and it's really tough to create a compelling, optimized experience for 200 different device types. Where iOS, it's a closed platform, and there are pros and cons of that, and I think one of the pros is a better, richer user experience that's easier for the developer to create, and then they can spread it across many more devices. And so this is another way of slicing that data in terms of who is driving the most sessions. And Xiaomi is again, it's a Chinese manufacturer. So this is a little bit of insight of how many sessions are your Chinese users generating when they download applications. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of the high-level overview of where we see the market and where we think it's going. And for the rest of the time that I have, I want to talk a little bit more about, on a micro level, on what to do with your application and how do I use analytics to really power better decisions, and what should I be tracking in order to get the most out of my app. 4 steps that we at Flurry see to making better decisions and actually using your data. Because your data, it's nice to have a lot of numbers that you can play with, but it doesn't mean anything unless you actually know how to use it and it changes the decision that you make. So obviously I work in analytics, I support our largest clients, and I help them analyze their information all day long. But it's worthless to understand what's happening in your application if it's not going to impact any action that you take. So if you're not going to make a decision based on this number, did that number even matter? I would say no. So unless you're using your information to really empower better decision making, what's the point of analytics? And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. So we want to talk about measuring your audience and really pinpointing and measuring those actions that actually matter. We want to identify our most valuable users. And once we know who our most valuable users are, we want to go out and get more of them so that we can acquire and help try to monetize them. And once we understand how that works, it becomes a wash, rinse, and repeat exercise that you can just continue doing. So this is really my approach to analytics and how we think about it at Flurry. And the first thing I want to talk about is measuring, the basics, right? It's the first place to start. So let's take the example of Bubble Mania. So it's a match 3 mechanic game, which means I'm trying to match 3 balls that are the same color of the ball that I have. And once I match 3, the balls will fall down, and then I'll save the baby. And I'll mention that Bubble Mania is not an app that we track. So this is just purely hypothetical if this would be my approach if I were going to instrument analytics in Bubble Mania. So the first thing you need to think about when you're starting to use any sort of analytics program is you want to track user behavior. Because it's nice to know how many daily actives, monthly actives, weekly actives you have, what's your retention, but what's really meaningful is the behaviors that people take in your app. So if you want someone to be able to send a tweet, check in on Facebook, you want someone to make an in-app purchase, or you want people just to spend time because you're monetizing them through advertising, it's important to understand what they're doing. So this is important from a business perspective, but then also from a product perspective. Because how do you know if somebody's getting stuck in some loop in a game, or it's taking them 15 minutes to finish level 1 and then everyone's dropping off unless you track it? So track user behavior with an event tag, and then you'll be able to see, all right, I know how many people made an in-app purchase. I know how many of those in-app purchases were $1.99 versus 99 cents. How many of them were stars, hearts, or shields? All of that stuff you should be able to track with events in your analytics. So let's go through an example. So what would be the events that I would create for a purchase funnel, for an in-app purchase in Bubble Mania? So the first thing I'd want to tag is that somebody got served the option to buy coins. Second thing I'd want to know that they actually clicked on buy coins. And then a really important step that a lot of people forget is that I also want to tag the fact that they confirmed it. Because who cares if they clicked on buy coins? I want to know if they actually went through with the purchase. And then finally, I want to confirm that I'm getting a receipt from the App Store. And this is also very important because if you have a successful app that's appealing to an international audience, you will face piracy issues. So you could be seeing in your analytics program that you are generating millions and millions of in-app purchases, but you don't see any money in your iTunes or Google Play account. And that's because your app's been cracked. So it's important to really track actually when the purchase has been confirmed and you've received a receipt from the App Store. So this is what your event structure would look like. You would say, all right, I have a high-level event of purchase has been completed. I want to capture additional metadata in a parameter, so the amount and the level that the person was on when they made that purchase. And another tip for another best practice is that you want to standardize how you name things. Because you may not be part of this app for its lifetime. You may launch other applications. You may have different people come in and try to interpret the data after you've set everything up. So please make your event names a human, readable format that's intuitive for someone to understand. And that's consistent throughout all of your applications because it'll make reading your data 6 months from now so much easier because you won't ask yourself, oh, what is that really measuring? It's really important to keep track of that stuff and really think about how do I want to structure the events that I'm tracking so that I can go back and more easily interpret my data later. So once you've tagged all of user behaviors in your application, you can start to understand the flow. So you have user paths, and this is telling you of all of the people that started a session in my application, what was their next step? And then what was their step after that? And when you explore how your users are navigating through your application, you can start to see where am I getting people stuck and where are they dropping off and ending the application. And once you understand what your most important conversion sequences are, you can create funnels that will track precisely all of the steps that people take and where they drop off. So if I have an in-app purchase event and I want to understand where are people falling out of my conversion funnel, this will easily allow you to do that. So here's the example for Bubble Mania. Here's what Bubble Mania's funnel might look like. So 75% of users were served the option of buying some coins, 35% went on to click it, 20% confirmed, but then only 17% the purchase actually was complete. Then we received a receipt from the App Store.
Is that sort of rough rule of thumb you see in most in-app purchases?
No. So these numbers are just totally arbitrary. So now that we understand what's going on in our application, we're measuring user behavior, we understand our conversion funnel, we know where people are falling off, we know how people are navigating around. Now we can start to identify who are my users that are the most valuable to me, because not all users are created equal. So the first way that you might want to understand who are my most valuable users is by creating segments of users. And you can segment your users based on anything. You can segment them based on where they live. You can segment them based on whether they're male or female. But the most important way, I think, of segmenting your users is based on their behavior. So if I were a Bubble Mania, I would certainly have a segment of users who are in-app purchasers that have made a purchase in my game. For your app, it's whatever important event that you really want them to do, create that segment. Because then once you've created segments of users, And for you, it might mean that your most valuable users are those that are a heavy user. They engage in 5 sessions a day. That might be most valuable for you. Create that segment of users who are most valuable, and then learn who they are. So, for example, in Bubble Mania, I probably want to create segments of users who are my whales, my minnows, my dolphins. And I want to create a segment of users who have ever made an in-app purchase, and then I want to create segments of users who have maybe spent more than $1,000 in the game. So creating a segment that is based on the total amount that you've ever spent in the application. So it's cumulative over somebody's lifetime in the application. It's a way of tracking, how valuable is this user to me over time. Another great way of creating a segment is of users who are not valuable in some way, right? So if I were Bubble Mania, I would want to create a segment of users who have never made an in-app purchase in my application so that I could try to monetize them in a different way. So at the same time, I don't want to serve advertising to my users who are spending a ton of money in my application, because that's annoying, right? So if I create a segment of users who have never made an in-app purchase, I can feel comfortable serving them advertising and making some money off of the amount of time they're spending in my application while not alienating my big whales who are spending hundreds of dollars in my app by serving them advertising. So it's really powerful ways of monetizing different types of users differently. And you can think of different applications of this depending on what is the purpose of your application. So once you know who your most powerful users are, you can then understand what they look like. So are my payers, what age are they? Are they more male than female? What countries do they live in? What persona do they fit in? And personas is something that's unique to Flurry, and it's our estimate of what behaviors or what activities you're actually really interested in based on the types of apps that you use. So for example, we have a auto enthusiast persona, and someone would be considered an auto enthusiast if they engage in applications that are reading auto news, they're shopping for a new car, or they're checking out their owner's manual, things like that. So you can really understand, wow, I didn't know that I had so many new moms engaging in my application. And once you understand who your users are, you'll be better able to attract people that look like your most valuable user. And that's really what Flurry wants to help you get to. We want you to be able to understand who is driving value for me, and how do I go out and get people who look like the people who are driving value for me, so I can create this virtuous cycle of ROI. So once you know who your most valuable users are, maybe they're female, they're young women, they're American, and they're fashionistas. So now I know those are the people that spend money in Bubble Mania. So now I can go out and try to attract more people who look a lot like these folks. No, just kidding. So if I go out and I run a user acquisition campaign to target young American women who are fashionistas in order to download my application, because I've recognized they spend the most amount of money in my app and I want a lot more like them. If I run a user acquisition campaign, I would be crazy to spend money to acquire new users to my app without tracking that. So you would never spend a dime on the web without expecting some really advanced tracking to understand who you reached and what activity they engaged in after the fact. So you should do the same thing in mobile. Flurry can help you track all of the ads that you run to drive users to your application, and not only how many of them clicked on it, how many of them went on to install, but what did they do after the fact. So did I drive somebody who eventually went on to make an in-app purchase? Did I drive people that look like my most valuable users? Am I going to readjust all of my user acquisition spend based on the channels that drive me the most valuable users? This is a really powerful insight that you should expect, that there's no other industry where you would spend these ad dollars and not expect to hear that feedback. And for a long time, mobile was like that. But I think now we're finally at the point where there's tools. It's free to use in Flurry. There are others that you could use as well, but I highly encourage you not to spend $1 in mobile unless you could track what that dollar is doing for you. Another great way of driving installs for your app is cross-promotion. So as you grow and as you launch new applications, Flurry can really help you analyze how many users do I have in common with my different applications. And so this is an example, right? These are just app A, B, and C. And if I see that app A and app A and let's look at app D here only have 1% of users in common, about 2 million users in this context, I'm going to assume that, you know what, app A could be a game that's targeted at young women, and app D could be a really hardcore. There might be some overlap here in apps B and A and C, right? So maybe I want to cross promote and I want to try to drive users of app A into app B because they haven't downloaded it yet. And that's free for you and a really powerful way of acquiring new users that is a lot of times underutilized. So once you've acquired all these users and you've spent a lot of money and you've optimized your cross-app promotion, if you want to monetize those users, advertising is a great way of doing it, and it's probably the most common way of trying to make money off of your users. And you can really up the eCPM, the effective CPM that you're earning, if you're selling more targeted advertising. And that's why it's important to understand, are most of my users female? Are most of my users male? Are they 55 plus? Are they 35 to 54? Understanding that really helps advertisers target the right people, and it can help you earn a higher CPM. So what we see is that if you offer gender or age targeting, you could earn $2 plus additional CPM for your application. And personas, I mentioned before, are another great way of selling your audience. So advertisers, it's not enough to say, all right, I'm going to deliver you males 18 to 24. They now want to know, are they into cars? Are they into music? Are they into movies? Are they into TV? Personas helps you understand, what are my users doing in other apps when they're not in my application? Are they really into hardcore gaming? Are they a business traveler? What are they doing? And being able to target at a persona level gives you a lot more value, and it serves your users a lot more valuable advertising, and isn't quite as annoying, right, when you get served something that's relevant to you. And finally, this is kind of monetization ad serving 101. So when you start to think about monetizing your users with advertising, the most profitable way of doing so is direct sold ads, right? These are premium ads served directly to brands, but it's tough when you're just starting out because you need a sales force. You need to call in all these brands. You need to negotiate every deal. This is probably not something that's really makes sense for an independent developer starting out. Network mediation is probably the next step, is to being able to pull in from all different networks, optimize CPM to serve whenever your ad comes up. So you can leverage any number of ad networks to be able to serve an advertisement that will get you the highest CPM at any given time, targeted at whatever user you want to serve that ad to. And then finally, the real-time bidded exchange, RTB, will allow you to really fill in all of that remnant inventory. It'll allow you to make sure that you're optimizing your CPMs, you're earning the most that you can by pulling from all of the sources that are plugged into RTB. So what we talked about today is this idea of ROI, right? Everyone's trying to build a successful app. You want to drive engagement. You want to drive retention. You want to drive session length and usage, grow your audience. And in order to do that, you really need to be thinking ahead, right? You need to understand, what are people doing in my application? Who are the people that are driving the most value for me? How do I acquire more users that are going to look like my most valuable users? And finally, how can I then monetize those folks? And that's really the process in a nutshell of how to build a successful app business and what you should be thinking about when you look to your analytics solution. Because if you have analytics that aren't helping you do these, we need to talk, because there's a lot of room for you to improve. And so I'm happy to take any questions that you guys might have about this stuff or about mobile in general. And if not, we can just eat some more pizza and beer. Any questions? No? Okay. Yeah.
How would what's the process in terms of finding, launching a new app, working with Flurry, getting Flurry analytics? What would be the process?
That's an excellent question. So what's the process of getting Flurry in a new app? So you just go to flurry.com, sign up. It's free. You tell Flurry, what platform am I developing for? iOS, Android, Windows, BlackBerry. You download the SDK, and from there, that's it. You integrate the SDK into your application. There's two flavors of integration. One is the really basic out-of-the-box implementation, where you get just active user numbers, the gender estimates, age estimates, persona estimates, but no detailed information. But then if you really want to use analytics, you want to tag all of your events, user behavior. So then it's just a matter of copy pasting the code and telling Flurry, hey, this means that somebody made a purchase in my app, and that's it. And so it takes probably about 10 minutes to do the basic implementation. It takes a little bit longer for you to think of all the structure of how you want to structure all of your data that you're going to get on the back end. But it's worth the investment up front so that later when you're interpreting all of your data, when it starts coming in, you know what you're looking at.
I think it's free. How do you guys make your money for advertising?
Exactly. So how does Flurry make money if analytics is free? We take the aggregate data that we are collecting with analytics, and we use that to target better advertising, both for advertisers and for publishers. So for example, you'll notice that Flurry provides age and gender estimates. And the way that we get that information is we have folks who are using Flurry in an application that asks their users to tell the app what's their age and gender. So social networking apps, dating apps, that kind of thing. And so then Flurry will say, all right, that unique device reported to an app that's using Flurry that the user is 18 and male. And then Flurry says, okay, what other apps on that device are using Flurry? And we'll say, okay, there are 5 apps on this device using Flurry. So that is a profile of someone who's 18 and male. Now, we're tracking over 300,000 applications across over 900 million devices. So you can imagine the kind of data that we have. And so we have an algorithm that is a machine learning algorithm that can go through and look at all of the apps that are on a device that has your app and say, do any of these match a profile that we know about? And that's how we can estimate age and gender. And that's what we can use for serving ads, and then also for advertisers to help reach the audience they want to target. And that's how Flurry makes money, is charging an additional CPM for the value we bring with all of our age, gender, and persona estimates.
How do you deal with something like the data protection issues in the European Union, with all that data collection and cross-pollution between applications? I don't think users specifically sign up for Flurry. So how do you get permission to share all that data from the individual applications?
Yeah, so as part of our terms of service, the app developer needs to include in their terms of service that they are using Flurry Analytics and allow their users to opt out if they want to. So that.
Do you do any reporting to places like EU for users of Flurry in European Union for your data capture?
So we don't do any specific reporting. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but.
Registered as a user of data for data protection stuff.
Oh, that I don't know if we're registered per se, but we work with the FTC. We work with the regulators in Europe. Germany's the most strict jurisdiction in the EU. And so we've worked with all of these regulatory bodies, and so we're in compliance with all of them. And the way that we approach it and the way that's acceptable to them is by putting the onus on the app developer. They need to provide their user the information that me as an app developer, I've chosen to use analytics. This is what I'm using for analytics. And if you do not want to be tracked, here's how you as an end user can opt out. Anything else, guys?
How is data accessed then by the application?
Yeah, so what happens is because you've got our SDK in your app and the Flurry code is in your code, whenever a user on end session, it will actually send the packets of information of what a user does to Flurry, and then you as an app developer would log into the Flurry dev portal online and you would see all of your charts. So much like a Google Analytics or an Omniture, you would see all of your data presented in charts and graphs online. No, it's sent at the end of every session. So whenever a user closes the application, we send the activity for that last application session to Flurry servers. What percentage of your users use event tracking? That's a good question. It's actually about 70%. So it's pretty good. We're always trying to encourage people to think a little bit more smartly about what they're tracking, just to make your own life easier and to make sure that you have a question, 6 months after your app launches, make sure that you tagged that behavior so that you can later answer that question you didn't know you were going to have. But we have pretty good adoption of events because I think people see the value. Anything else, guys? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And please, if there's any pizza left, have at it. There's certainly beer left. So Thanks for coming by.